Alrighty, lads, it's early as fuck in the morning, and here we are talking about war, because that's what you want to wake up your day with. Boom, bang, pow. It's going to feel a little bit like Ukraine right now. So, the Anhur rebellions. No other way to really start it. I re-recorded myself like 4 times and I couldn't think of a good intro, so we're just going to fucking go with it. The Anhur rebellions. So, Mass Effect has known for a lot of things. A lot of its interesting liberties and interesting takes on what it would be like in a civilization where multiple civilizations exist with multiple different forms of government, many different species, yada yada yada. Well, the Anhur rebellions is pretty interesting because this is a whole solar system that was engaged in such turmoil that it resulted in the system being forever changed. This war, you may ask, what was it about? So let's first talk a bit about some background information. The timeline. It lasted about 2 years. That's how long this war lasted. Just 2 simple years. From the year 2176 to the year 2178. Now, it wasn't fought predominantly on the planet of Anhur, despite the name Anhur Rebellions. It wasn't. It was actually mostly fought in space. Now, there's 2 sides to the conflict. There's the Eclipse mercenaries versus the Nahesset rebels. So, we're going to talk about what those sides stood for. So first, let's talk about the planet, Anhur. It's basically like an Earth planet. It's huge. It's got a huge amount of natural resources that it even says in the universe that this planet could be booming with its industry, booming with its manufacturing capabilities had they just mined the platinum resources that are sitting there. But unfortunately, they live in the Terminus system. So since the planet is in the Terminus system, one of the only people that they can really trade with would be other Terminus systems. And guess who else is in the Terminus system? The Batarian hegemony. The Batarian hegemony believes in slavery, so therefore they have free labor to conduct all their businesses, and therefore their goods come very, very cheaply. This is very important because of what happened on this planet. The planet Anhur was a majority human populated planet, but they did have a Batarians living with them. The Batarians that live with them would be somewhere around like 40% of the population, maybe less. But overall, it was majority dominated by humanity. Now, the economy of the planet was easily being eclipsed by the Batarian hegemony due to, as we talked about, cheap labor. So the politicians on the planet of Anhur decided that, well, if we can't beat them, join them. So they decide to enact not slavery. And this is where it gets really legal and really technical. You can tell a lawyer wrote this shit. They made it where it is now legal for you to pay your employees 0 credits an hour. The legal minimum wage dropped to 0 credits an hour. So what did that mean? That thereby made it where the employees would be paid in nothing, and that the people who would work for certain corporations would have to sign contracts basically waiving away a lot of their rights. In exchange, they would be taken care of, they would be given food, water, shelter, as their masters deemed it necessary. The people had no choice. They had to agree to these terms. After all, work is work. At least I have something over my head. The Batarians who lived on this planet loved the idea. They formed this group called the Nahesset. They were probably the planet's politicians and had control over a vast amount of the resources, the ships, and the weapons, and armor, etc., etc. But the human population on the planet rioted immediately and fought back with everything they had. This is where the Eclipse mercenaries come in. For the human population, while they did not have resources, while they did not have ships, they did not have weapons, they did not have a lot of things, they did have money and resources. So, they used all their collected funds to pay the Eclipse mercenaries to help wage the war for them. The Eclipse has ships. The Eclipse has everything. Now, what's interesting about this war is that it shows how smart both sides were. The rebels, the abolitionists, the humans, who were trying to abolish the slavery policy, were smart enough to know, hey, we can maybe take control of the planet Anhur, but what about the other planets in the solar system, which is where most of the stuff comes from, like the planet of Neith, Bast, Sekhmet, Sobek. These planets were more vital than the actual home planet itself of Anhur. These planets, while again, they're mostly dead planets, uninhabitable, they did have a lot of resources, and this is where a lot of space stations existed. So, while the people on the planet of Anhur could fight and could possibly overthrow the government, they could not overthrow the government in the entire region. So they needed someone who does have a ship, who does have arms, who does have their own resources to use. This is why they paid the Eclipse mercenaries to come and fight their war against the Nahesset. This is where the war really kicks off. Whoo-wee! You ready? So, the battle starts Neith. Neith is one of the outermost planets, It has a very cold, thin atmosphere, and the planet is covered in salt. So imagine something that looks like the moon, but the ground is actually salt. As the war is waged on the planet of Anhur, the Eclipse make their very first entry into the war onto the planet of Neith. Here, the Eclipse make planetfall, and instead of making planetfall and establishing a base, they are immediately attacked by dug-in, fortified Nahesset forces. This was the very first battle, and already was off to a really bad start. The Eclipse mercenaries were caught off guard, missiles flying at them from all directions. The Nahesset, with all their ships and all their resources, knew what the rebels were doing before the rebels did it. This shows a real war scenario where both sides have their plans, both sides don't exactly know what's going on, but they can make a good guess, and sure enough, it pays off. The Eclipse mercenaries were defeated, and this was a serious blow to the rebels' causes. But, thankfully, the Eclipse mercenaries had their own tricks up their own sleeves in dealing with the Nahesset and dealing with their, more or less, aggression. So, this takes us to the next planet where the battle continues. Bast. It's a gas giant. It's mostly known for refueling stations. But on the planet of Bast, the Eclipse had a fallback outpost station there. So after their defeat on the planet of Neith, the Eclipse leaked data indicating to the Nahesset where the Eclipse were falling back to. Where were they retreating? This, of course, was falsified data. The Eclipse purposely gave to the Nahesset a chance to experience what the Eclipse had just suffered through on the planet of Neith. In other words, the Nahesset were about to have their pants drop down. Now, the battle was close. It was a pitched victory. The battle was so bad, we're talking losses on every side. The battle was so severe and so bad that both sides claimed that they won the battle, which just shows that so much was lost that neither side really had any idea. Did we win? Did we win? I'm not sure. I think we won. Because, I mean, we destroyed 30 of their ships. They destroyed, 40 of ours. But I think we won. Like, they have no fucking idea who the fuck won. I love that so much. The idea that a battle is so bad, thousands are dead, and you're just going to sit there and go, well, I guess we won. And this is where the planet of Anhur was still dealing with a lot of turmoil. The planet itself is still engulfed in flames. Eclipse mercenaries are asking for more money, more resources. And of course the citizens are taxed because after all, they don't have jobs. They're busy fighting a war that they really don't have much chance of winning. This is where the war progresses. And as time goes on, the planet of Sekhmet is next. This is a gas giant that's near the sun, and the Nahesset had refueling stations there. These refueling stations is what allowed them to continue their war, to continue their aggression. Now, the Eclipse knew, hey, if we take out these refueling stations, it would be vital to the war effort. It would stop the Nahesset from gaining supplies and refueling their ships. So they attacked it. By using the asteroid field, they were able to sneak on through. And sure enough, as they were sneaking through, they didn't realize that it was an ambush. They were ambushed by Nahesset ships, and they took extremely heavy hits, extremely heavy casualties. Now, what makes this even worse is that not only were they exiting an asteroid field, being attacked and ambushed, but the moment they exited the asteroid field, they met 2 carriers. Now, that's pretty impressive, because in Mass Effect, carriers are considered dreadnoughts. They're considered borderline dreadnoughts. It's a very human design, and here it is, the Batarian Nahesset are using them. Carriers are the size of dreadnoughts, but they don't have the guns of dreadnoughts, so therefore they're not considered dreadnoughts. But they do have that firepower because of how many fighters they're carrying. So the Eclipse just walked right out of the frying pan and into the fire. They are taking attacks from all sides. But despite the persistent damages they are being taken, the Eclipse won the day. They pushed through. They took out both carriers, and they took out the refueling stations. This was a war of determination. And much like, I would say, the Cuban Revolution in the Godfather series, you can tell when one side's going to win when they purposely carry grenades in their pockets and charge at you. These are not people you're going to put down easily. And the Nahesset were no longer going to be able to say, hey, we're winning this fight. No. The loss of the planet of Sekhmet was so severe. It was such a serious blow to their morale and such a serious blow to their war effort and resources that they forever lost any advantage that they could have had. From here on out, every battle that the Nahesset fought was a loss. Every battle that the slave abolitionists in the Eclipse waged was a victory. The Nahesset were on the falling ground. They knew their time was over. This is where we get to the final planet. This planet is really what changed everything. You see, the planet of Sobek is a gas giant known for its multiple slave camps. There was many stations there that were mining the planet for its resources. And at the end of the war, the Eclipse made their final assault on the Nahesset, which was the planet of Sobek, their final stronghold. Here, the Eclipse mercs discovered the true cruelties of slavery. The Batarians of the Nahesset purposely made their slaves live in very poor gravitational living conditions. Intentionally. The gravity was so unstable for life that the surviving slaves could not live in normal gravity anymore. They suffered such severe bone loss, such severe malnutrition, that they couldn't exist in a normal way, or else they would die. When the news of this was leaked to the galactic community of the atrocities these people had suffered, millions and millions of credits were raised in charity groups to help these people rehabilitate and return to a semi-normal life. The Eclipse mercenaries were exonerated as heroes. This was an amazing victory for humanitarian causes. But, unfortunately, millions of lives would be affected by this. Millions of lives would never recover. And to this day, the planet of Anhur is in permanent poverty. Permanent, despite the abundance of resources they have. Because this 2-year-long war put them in such crippling debt, in such crippling conditions. The people are still inflicted with these ailments that their fathers had. These people are still inflicted with the scars of war. They're still dealing with credit cards that are maxed out because they needed to share their debt together to pay these mercenaries, or else they would have been slaves. To this day, the Eclipse mercenaries have a memorial on the planet of Sobek. It's an office that's more an administrative office, and they use it for recruiting purposes and also just showboating to say that, you know, we're the good guy mercenaries, we're nice people. But to this day, the people who lived on the planet of Anhur know this extension of slavery. They know how terrible it was. They know how bad it could get. And to this, I'd say they're the most important piece of history we could see in the Mass Effect universe. how politicians who are so worried about their deadlines for an economy resort to adapting the economy plans of a otherwise tyrannical organization. And this is where a minority, the Batarians, can commit atrocities that even the majority could do. Humans could have went on a human genocide and just wiped out the Batarians, but they didn't. Meanwhile, the minorities of the Batarians decide to go on this nasty anti-humanitarian slavery where they purposely tortured the people who were slaves for no real reason at all other than to get their own kicks out of it. So this shows a lot of lessons, and interestingly enough, it reminds me a lot of India. Many of you may know something about India's history, but India had similar issues in real life where the Muslims were a minority, yet they did have power, and they always enacted laws to the point that the Indian populace were like, fuck this, we're overthrowing the government, fuck them. So it is a very interesting idea in the Mass Effect universe that a minority can cause such great calamity, that a minority group can create such awful, awful things. And yet, through it all, humanitarian needs prosper. Through it all, there is a light in the end of the tunnel. Through it all, everyone was able to overcome the great evil by utilizing the good. Besides that, this has been Freedom 700. I hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys next time.